I want to thank you once again for having this breakfast. Being in office 9 years, I make it a point to be here, particularly since I've been on the Mental Health Committee for all those 9 years that I've been in the Assembly. Because it's important, and I know my colleagues feel it's important also. That's why they have their reps here, and that's why Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis is here, because it's at these breakfasts that we truly understand the nuances of the issues, particularly with mental health. And it's important for us, particularly now in this budget process. You know, we get bombarded with many pieces of the budget through when the governor announces it up until hopefully April 1st, and it is overwhelming at times, and that's why we count on your organizations here and your advocates who come up to Albany. You know, Larry and Linda and Dean were up to see me in my office a couple of weeks ago, and it's important that we're updated on what's going on, because it's important to know from you how it's affecting you, our votes. I always say to groups when I'm speaking, particularly school-age kids, you know, every decision we make in Albany affects your life. I say that to school kids even when they're not of voting age. I said, even though you can't vote, anything I do up in Albany affects your life now, and it affects it when you're of voting age. So it's important to be involved. And that's why I give everyone in this room a lot of credit, because you need to be involved. If you don't hold our feet to the fire, if you don't tell us what is specifically needed, it won't get done. We need you to be involved, and that's why it's very important that you are involved. You've heard this many times, I'm sure, and many of you have probably heard it from me in the many breakfasts that we've been at together this year. The budget is probably the toughest one that we've had, definitely in the 9 years I've been in Albany. And there have to be decisions made, tough decisions made, and there have to be cuts made. We all know that. We've gone through it. Larry has gone through it in his presentation. You've read it in the papers. You've heard me say it 100 times. You've heard Nicole. You've heard Andy Lanza. You heard Diane Savino, Matt Titone, Lou Tobacco. We've all said it. But there is a way to make cuts in knowing what you're cutting. It's easy to say and go to Albany and say, I'm going to cut the waste in Albany. How many of us have heard that said? Right? And of course, there's waste everywhere. But a lot of a budget isn't waste that's on the cutting board. And coming to a breakfast like this, you see the faces. I always say that a budget is a living document, because it involves human beings. It involves your lives. It involves your children's lives. It involves your parents' lives. Any decision, as I said before, that we make in a budget affects human beings. There's a face to every decision on a cut and a decision on spending. And people can say, well, we're going to cut waste. There's still faces to those cuts. And that's what people need to understand in this process. You know, it's very easy to say that we're going to go out there and we're going to cut spending and we're going to cut and bring our state back. We're all for that. This delegation in Staten Island, we work very well together. We're all on the same page on that. We're all on the same page. But it is not going to happen in 1 year. This is a process. We're not going to drag it out either. But you can't make all the cuts and lack of spending in 1 year because you want to fix decades of mismanagement. That's why it's very important that we make smart cuts. That's why it's very important that we listen to you at these breakfasts and understand, okay, the governor proposed this cut. Well, it doesn't really work in Staten Island for the mental health community. Let's come up with an alternative. Let's come up where we can restore that cut, but we'll come up, maybe there is ways that we can find. But that's what the whole budget dialogue is all about. It's not a one-sided dialogue. And it's not a three-sided dialogue that many people think. It's 1 million, 10 million. It's millions of dialogues happening that should be included in this budget. And it's very important that people know that, because there will be cuts, we all know that. And it is still going to be a very difficult budget this year. I'm not trying to sugarcoat that. It's still going to be very difficult. But it's important that as legislators, we listen. We just don't come here and have the great breakfast that the Staten offers, but we actually listen to what you're saying. And there shouldn't be any ideologues that feel that we do one thing or we don't do it at all. The way I legislate and the way I hope I have legislated over 9 years is back to the fact that the budget is a living document. Every decision that I look at in that budget, every vote that I make on a budget, I remember the faces in this room. I remember the faces of the kids at PS 35 or Nicole's old school IS 24. I remember the folks at the senior center that I'm going to later today. But that's what's important, to not think in broad terms and be an ideologue on something, but know that people are directly affected. Directly affected. We're not talking about general discussions here. This is a direct effect. So I want you to know that we are taking it very seriously, particularly in the delegation from Staten Island. We work very well together in coming up with a plan on voting for the budget. We work together to figure out what we can put in, what we can continue to cut without making devastating choices here in Staten Island. I just want to comment on a few of the things that were brought up. We talk about OMIC. We all know, particularly with a lot of the stories that have been in the paper, there are a lot of abuses, particularly to mental health patients and folks in the mental health community, and they need to be protected. Our most vulnerable need to be protected. But an agency should not be a revenue source solely. They should be an enforcement force. They should not be in the budget for revenue. And it's very important. That gets lost sometimes, particularly in this last couple of weeks that we have towards the budget, because, quite frankly, all of us in the legislature are now looking for ways that we can come up with, because, quite frankly, every vote we make, we got to find a way to pay for it. And unfortunately, this process with OMIC has turned into, in my estimation, has turned into a revenue source. Just like a tax or anything else, a surcharge, whatever you want to call it, it has turned into a revenue source. And we have to streamline it at this point to bring it back to its original purpose. And that is to enforce and protect those most vulnerable in our society. And that is something that I will work very hard, and I have worked very hard with the Mental Health Society to make sure that we're that we make that happen. Early intervention, I know that it was brought up, and we are dealing with that in the budget. To hear the stories today of the parents of children is heartbreaking, but it's energizing in the same sense, because it makes us as legislators realize how very important it is to make sure that we protect our children in the mental health community. And I'm sorry, I'm not great with names, but the story about the young man who was in school and playing with the toy and banging his head back and forth, and that no one could point them in the right direction, is a disgrace. And this is something that needs to be addressed swiftly. But it's a systemic problem that we have in our state. It's not just that one incident. And these are the things that when we're making, people say that the budget is separate from the rest of what we do in Albany. I disagree, because the budget is how we fund those systems and those programs that will allow that incident never to happen again. And that's why it's important that we don't look at the budget as just an April 1st vote. The budget is the big picture. We talk about the big picture. The budget is the big picture, because without the funding and without severe cuts, there's no way that we can go forward and make sure something like that doesn't happen if the funding isn't available for something like that. So it's very important, and I just want to let the mother who came up here know that we are going to work and make sure that that never happens again. And we want to thank you. You know, those of you who know me, I don't really talk this long, but I figured Diane Savino and Andy Lanza and Matt Titone aren't here, so I can take up a little bit of their time, and then Nicole can take the rest. But these are very important issues, and I really feel passionate about this, that we need to talk about it. One issue that Larry brought up, of course, was I am working with them, and so is Senator Savino, on making sure that we work in the schools to do away with the stigma. And Larry is right. New York State, New York City does not like to be told by the legislature, although I disagree. I think they need to be told a lot of things, what they're doing wrong and what they should be doing. They don't like to be mandated on curriculum. I have a bill that would mandate curriculum on teen dating violence. So what we did when they blocked it on me in education, we started a pilot program in Susan Wagner on teen dating violence. So Larry and Linda were up to see me, and we were talking about it, and Diane Savino is working very hard on this issue. We're going to work to have a pilot program to show the state of New York how very important it is to teach our kids about no stigmas. Because if we don't teach our children at a young age, it will continue. And it's important that we go to the schools and let them know that this is a very important issue, and teach them, because no fault to their parents, it just may not be talked about in their house or at the dinner table or at Thanksgiving or wherever they may be. But it doesn't mean it's not there. So they need to be educated. Just like they're educated on everything else in the society, they need to be educated about that. And in closing, I just want to say, on the theme of Staten Island being treated fairly, there is the evidence points out that Staten Island, in most cases, Dr. Poplar has shown me numbers today on an issue. There are issues in other areas of Staten Island where Staten Island is not treated fairly. but it's most evident, I believe, in the mental health community. Many of you have to go off of Staten Island to be treated, or to go to the doctor, or to get vital services. And there's not one real state or city agency that is located here in this borough. That is not fair. And I've had this discussion with the mayor's office, and I've had this discussion with the governor's office. When we're working on this budget, part of cutting costs should be, what we should look into is, let's cut down on rent or costs of buildings in Manhattan or even Brooklyn. I am sure rent is cheaper here on Staten Island than it is in most parts of New York City. And I'm not saying move every agency here. Give us one for now. But that's one way to cut the budget. But ladies and gentlemen, I monopolized everyone's time today. I just want to thank you for having this breakfast. Thank you for working with us. And I look forward to continue working with you for the mental health community and for Staten Island. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Larry, and thank you everybody for the very warm welcome. So we heard from our dean, who has been working for us for 9 years now, and now I'm at the other side of the spectrum. I've been there for about 2 months. So obviously I don't have as much to say in terms of accomplishments in the legislature, but I will say that I'm very happy to be here. And as the Assemblyman said, these forums are so important, especially to somebody like me who's new in Albany, because it's so important to just hear directly from you what your concerns are, how we can help, and what your needs are, especially during a time like this when we're really going through such a difficult period in this state. Look, as the Assemblyman said, this is a difficult year, and we know that there's going to be a lot of painful cuts, and there's going to be a lot of sacrifice across the board. And I think that, unfortunately, these are the things that we need to do to put the state back on track for the future, so we can make sure that programs like this will always thrive in this community. But with that said, we need to make sure that we don't have our programs that we do have don't get lost in the shuffle, especially this year, because it's such a difficult time. One of my best friends suffers from severe depression, and it's, I'm always very saddened when I speak to her, and it's just a very sad situation, because I understand the difficulty she has to socialize, to work, to keep focused on specific projects. And so I think because of this experience with my friend, I think I do have an understanding of how important day programs are, how important housing issues are. And it also, in terms of housing, as you mentioned, it saves the state money in the long run, because it stops unnecessary visits to emergency rooms, or and as I think I've estimated maybe $16 million it costs that we could be saving. And I would just like to, you offered an opportunity to go for a tour, and I gladly accept. I would love to come for a tour, and we will set that up. And I'll be more than happy to come for a tour of the facility. With that said, I do want to commend my colleagues, Assemblyman Cusick and Senator Diane Savino, for spearheading this pilot program for our schools. Because I do think it is important that we start at a very early age and we teach our children, because that will help get rid of the stigma. And I gladly join you in supporting this initiative, and I thankfully, thank you for allowing me to be a part of it as well, and I will definitely support you in this effort. With regards to Medicaid and OMIG, since it was brought up a number of times, you came to see me in Albany, as did Linda, and we discussed this, and it seems that, with these audits, it seems it's almost at the point of harassment. And I think, yes, we do have waste and fraud and abuse, as the Assemblyman mentioned. It's estimated about 10% of our overall Medicaid budget is waste and fraud. And, unfortunately, I think that the Medicaid redesign team came out with only one proposal that would target about $80 million of this for an abuse. And during the health budget hearings, I had questioned our OMIG, the Inspector General, and I really implored him to look for more ways to try to combat. And I understand it's a long process, and it's not going to happen overnight, and it won't be done this year. But we need to really start focusing more on preventing the waste, preventing the fraud, preventing the abuse, because if we don't, it's going to be programs like early intervention, like mental health, developmental disabilities, that are going to get lost in the shuffle to these across-the-board cuts. So with that said, I really look forward to working with each of you over the next couple of years. I thank you very much for having me here. I specifically, Larry has been wonderful, and Linda, they came up to Albany to visit me, and I greatly appreciate that. Dr. Poplar, who I've known for a very long time, I appreciate his support in these efforts. And of course, Siemens Society, I have to give them a shout out because I was a board member for 4 years, and I appreciate them, and I look forward to working with all of you in the years to come. Thank you for having me.